There's a reason Australians who grew up in the 70s say they had more fun with less money, less stuff, and less technology than kids do today. And it's not just nostalgia talking. Something real existed back then that has quietly, completely disappeared from Australian life. And most of us didn't even notice it was gone until it was too late. So what did the 70s actually have that we lost? And can we ever get it back? Picture this: summer, 1974, a Saturday morning in January. Done somewhere in suburban Australia. Could be Footscray, could be Penrith, could be Salisbury. It doesn't matter, because every suburb smelled the same on a Saturday morning back then. Wet concrete drying fast in the heat, cut grass going brown at the edges, and somewhere close by, the slow, heavy thwack of a hills hoist spinning in the warm morning breeze. You were already awake. You'd been awake for an hour, not because anyone made you get up, but because the day was already out there and happening without you, and that felt like a waste. You pulled on your shorts from the floor. You didn't look for a shirt. You went outside through the back door and the fly screen slapped shut behind you and nobody stirred. The backyard felt enormous. It always did. The grass was dry and a little scratchy under your bare feet. The sprinkler was coiled up near the tap where your dad had left it. The dog lifted its head when you came out and then put it back down. But the sky was already white with heat and it wasn't even 8 o'clock yet. Your mum was up. She was always up before anyone else. You could hear her moving around in the kitchen, the particular sound of the kettle, the clink of a teacup, the radio coming on low. She had the washing already sorted into the basket by the back door. She would get to the hills hoist before the sun got too high. She knew how to read a summer morning. She'd been doing it her whole life. Yet by 9 o'clock, there were kids at the back gate. Nobody called ahead. Nobody arranged anything. They were just there. 2 from next door, 1 from across the road. And the day organised itself the way days did back then, without anyone being in charge of it. Your mum came out, looked at the lot of you, and handed over a packet of iced Vovos without much comment. She told you to stay out of the garden beds. That was it. That was the whole arrangement. Yet you went to the milk bar on the corner at some point. You had 20 cents. You spent it on mixed lollies weighed out on a little metal scale while the man behind the counter waited without rushing you. Clinkers, a couple of Redskins, milk bottles. The bag went warm and slightly see-through by the time you got home. Nobody was watching the clock. Nobody had anywhere to be. This wasn't just a Saturday. Yet this was the whole shape of childhood in a country that still believed ordinary life was enough. That a backyard and a bike and 20 cents and a long hot day with nowhere particular to go was not a small thing. It was everything. It was what Australia was made of. And for one last bright, unhurried decade, it was still completely, fully ours. Your mum knew things about the 1970s that nobody ever wrote down. But she knew that the hills hoist had to be loaded heavy side out, so it didn't tip in the wind. She knew which day the bread was freshest at the milk bar and which day it wasn't worth buying. She knew that a family of 5 could eat a decent dinner for under $3 if you knew what you were doing, and she knew what she was doing. She kept a little notebook in the kitchen drawer with prices written in pencil. Mince at 60 cents a pound. A loaf of tip-top bread for 18 cents. Yes, a dozen eggs for 45 cents. Because every cent had somewhere it needed to go, and she was the one who made sure it got there. Your dad's job was different, but just as specific. He was the one who kept things running. The Kingswood needed an oil change, and he did it in the driveway on a Saturday afternoon with the radio going and a can of VB sweating in the heat beside him. He knew how to fix the lawnmower when it seized. Now, he knew which neighbour had the right tool for which job and that borrowing it was fine as long as you returned it clean. He didn't talk much about any of this. He just did it, the same way his father had done it, because that was how things worked, and there was no particular reason to explain what everybody already understood. What you understood as a kid was that there were rules nobody had written down, but everyone followed. You didn't go into the lounge room in your dirty feet. Yeah, you didn't touch the television dial when your dad was watching the news. You didn't ask for things at the milk bar beyond what you'd been given the money for. You waited. You were patient in ways that felt completely normal, because you'd never known anything else. Waiting was just part of how things worked. You waited for Saturday cartoons. You waited for your turn at the Hills Hoist cricket game. Yet you waited for the pie to cool down. Because if you didn't, it burned the roof of your mouth, and there was no sympathy available for that particular injury. The milk bar smelled of hot chips and sugar and something underneath both of those things that was just specifically chemically itself. The glass lolly jars were lined up along the counter, and they caught the light in the afternoon and made everything look slightly magical. Fantails were 2 cents each. Yet a Chico roll from the Bain Marie cost 20 cents, and nobody asked questions about the Bain Marie because the Chico roll was magnificent, and that was enough. The man behind the counter knew your name. He knew your order, he knew which kids were good for it and which kids needed watching. And he made those judgments quietly and without fuss, and the whole arrangement worked because everyone involved was operating on something that wasn't written in any rule book, but was completely real. Now, it was called trust. And in 1974, it was simply everywhere. It didn't end on a particular day. That's the thing nobody tells you. There was no announcement, no headline that said, "This is the last summer, it will feel like this." It just slowly, quietly began to change, the way a color fades in the sun. So gradually you don't notice until one day you hold it up to the light and realize it isn't what it was anymore. The first thing you noticed was the milk bar. Not yours specifically, but the one 2 streets over closed first, sometime around 1982. A handwritten sign appeared in the window on a Tuesday, and by Friday the glass lolly jars were gone, and the Bain Marie was cold and dark. A 7-Eleven opened on the main road not long after. It was brighter inside. It was open later. It sold more things. But the man behind the counter didn't know your name and wasn't going to learn it, and somehow 20 cents bought less in there than it ever had anywhere else. That even when the price was the same. Trading hours changed. Supermarkets stayed open longer, then on Sundays, then on public holidays. Each change made sense on its own. Each one was an improvement, technically speaking. More choice, more convenience, more hours. But the milk bars couldn't compete with more, because more had never been their point. Their point was knowing you, and knowing you doesn't scale. The drive-ins went next, or most of them did. But the VCR arrived in Australian lounge rooms through the early 1980s, and the logic was simple and brutal. Why load the family into the car and drive across town when you could rent a tape from the video shop for $3.50 and watch it on the couch? It was reasonable. It was efficient. The 330 drive-in theatres that had dotted the country at their peak fell to fewer than 20. The speakers came off the poles. The projector rooms went dark. Yes, the big white screens stood empty for a while, and then they came down too, and the land was used for something else. And most people were already watching something on the couch and didn't see it happen. The Globite school case disappeared from school gates across the country through the mid-1980s, replaced by the soft backpack, then the branded backpack, then the backpack with an American cartoon character on it that cost 4 times as much and lasted 1/4 as long. And nobody decided this was a good trade. It just happened, one school year at a time, until the brown, hard-sided case with the smell of hot plastic and pencil shavings was gone, and the kids carrying them were gone, and even the memory of carrying one was starting to fade. The station wagons built at Elizabeth in South Australia kept rolling off the line for decades, long after everything around them had changed. But on the 20th of October, 2017, the last Australian-made car rolled out of that factory and a crowd of workers stood and watched it go. Some of them were crying. The coverage was polite and brief. Then everyone moved on, and that was how it went. Not with a bang, just with everyone moving on. Here is what it actually was. It wasn't perfect. Don't let anyone tell you it was perfect. And don't let yourself remember it that way, because that's not fair to what it really was. So the 1970s in Australia were hot and scratchy, and sometimes so boring it felt like the afternoon would never end. The sunscreen wasn't good enough, and half the kids came home from the beach looking like cooked prawns. The asbestos was in the walls of the schools and nobody was talking about it. Women couldn't get a bank loan without their husband's signature until 1975, and even after that, the world moved slowly. There were things being done wrong that people weren't naming yet. But because naming them wasn't something the culture had learned to do. But inside all of that imperfection, something worked. Something quiet and ordinary and almost impossible to explain to someone who didn't live it. There was an agreement between people that nobody signed and nobody announced. It went something like this. We are all here, on this street, in this suburb, in this country, and we are basically on each other's side. So the man at the milk bar extended credit without making you feel small for needing it. Your mum fed the neighbour's kids without counting the biscuits. Your dad lent the tool and expected it back clean, and that was the whole contract and it held. Nobody was trying to extract maximum value from you. That's what's hard to explain to someone living now, in a world where every interaction has been quietly optimised to take a little more than it gives. The milk bar just wanted to sell you a Chico roll. The drive-in just wanted your family to have a good night. The Globite case just wanted to carry your books without falling apart. And it did that for a decade without being asked twice. Things were made to do their job. People were trusted to do theirs. Somewhere right now there is a Hills hoist still standing in a backyard. Yet the paint is chalking off the metal and it lifts very slightly to one side, but it still turns and it still holds the weight, and it will probably outlast everything around it. The way things made in that era tend to do. Somewhere at the back of a wardrobe at someone's grandmother's house there is a Globite school case with a name scratched into the lid, and a smell still locked inside it that would take you back 40 years if you opened it in a dark room and breathed in. Just these things are not gone. They are finished. And there is a difference. You are allowed to miss this. You don't need to apologize for the feeling or qualify it by listing everything that was wrong with the era, because you already know what was wrong with it. And you carry that knowledge and the nostalgia at the same time, because that is what adults do. Both things are true. It was flawed and it was real, and it gave you something that nobody has quite managed to package and sell back to you, yet no matter how many times they've tried. What we miss when we miss the 70s is not the decade. It is the feeling of being enough, of having enough, of a Saturday with no shape to it and 20 cents in your pocket and the whole long hot day still ahead. And that being, without question, without hesitation, sufficient. It was enough. We just didn't know to say so at the time. Do you remember the milk bar owner who knew your order before you opened your mouth? This saw the exact feeling of that fly screen door slapping shut behind you on a summer morning. Tell us in the comments. We're all carrying these memories together. And if this brought something back, please subscribe, because there are more stories here worth remembering.